Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I think there's still some people trying to find this place. Even if they're anywhere as directionally challenged as I can be, they may get here before the end, but hopefully, we wanted to get started, and I'm just here really to introduce this. I'm Judge Laporte from the Northern District of California, magistrate judge there, and this project, Women's Advocacy Project, began a little over a year ago when we were at a bench bar conference of the Northern District of California, and there was a panel, a very interesting panel, where Professors Deborah Rhode and here of Stanford with us tonight, and Professor Joan Williams of Hastings were talking about some of the obstacles that women attorneys face and have to try to navigate. One of them being what Joan Williams calls the tightrope, which is that narrow path between being perceived as nice and kind, but unfortunately that's somehow associated when it's a woman with being ineffective versus being perceived as effective, but paying a big price for being seen as not nice, as you should be if you're a woman, and therefore paying an unfair penalty. And some issues of unconscious bias that play into this. So a whole host of issues that you'll hear more from Professor Deborah Rhode tonight. And I remember commenting, though, that in my experience, when men or women, when they're blustery, overconfident, and seem to slide into arrogance, that's not effective. But what is effective? And at lunch, by happenstance, I happen to be sitting with a group of very talented women lawyers. In alphabetical order, a couple of them are here tonight. Kathy Dixon, who is an employment lawyer. I don't know if Randy Sue Pollock is here yet. She's a very wonderful criminal defense lawyer that she's coming, I know. And then not here tonight is Heidi Keefe, who's a very distinguished IP lawyer. And the reason she's not here is she's being honored tonight as one of the top women lawyers in tech. So we're extremely pleased that the Stanford Center on the Legal Profession was interested in co-sponsoring this program with us. We've done one somewhat similar at Hastings and sort of different one at the court involving judges. And we wanted to do one that was down here. And we're also we're so happy to have Professor Rhode's support, and also to have Lucy Rica, who's full of energy and been extremely helpful organizing this. You're going to hear from also our two excellent speakers and trainers, Dan Klein, who I've never heard, and I'm excited to hear as a lecturer at the Stanford D School. That's not what I thought, a typo, the design school, and I think also the B School as well, the business school, and in things like effective leadership skills and expression. He can tell you more. And also, I have had the pleasure before of hearing Cara Hale, who's with us, the author of the Credibility Code, which is down here, who's a very dynamic trainer and speaker about coming across effectively, not just with your words and what I was taught in law school, what's between your two ears, but all of you. And I want to particularly note my colleague, Paul Graywall, judge in San Jose, is here, which I appreciate. And I know we may have some more judges attending. I don't know if any of them are here yet, but thank you all for being here. And now I turn this over to Deborah.
Events like these always remind me of our partial progress in achieving an equal playing field for women in the legal profession. When I went to law school at Yale in the late 1970s, there were no events like this. I had no course at Yale by or about women. Discrimination was everywhere except in the curricula. And when I interviewed with a large Chicago firm that had one woman partner, I was told that there was no woman problem at that firm. Why, the partner had given birth to her first child the preceding year. It happened on a Friday, and she was back in the office the following Monday. Fast forward 3 decades, and I'm still collecting stories about these faster-than-a-speeding-bullet maternity leaves. I've even heard of women drafting interrogatory responses while in labor. I guess if you're billing at 6-minute intervals, why waste one? And while we've made enormous progress in gender equity at the entry level, at leadership levels, the problem is dispiritingly persistent. And one irony of this nation's continuing struggle for gender equity in employment is that the profession leading the struggle has failed to set an example in its own workplaces. In principle, of course, the bar is deeply committed to equal opportunity and social justice, but in practice, it lags behind other occupations. And part of the problem is lack of consensus on what exactly the problem is, what accounts for gender discrimination and gender inequalities in the law, who's responsible for addressing them, which proposed solutions would be worth the cost, and so forth. They're not new questions, but recent economic and client pressures have made clear the need for better answers. Many of the obstacles to equity in legal practice are symptomatic of deeper structural problems, and ones that we all have a stake in addressing. Certainly, viewed historically, we've made a lot of progress in the struggle for gender equity. Until the late 60s, as many of you know, women constituted no more than 3% of the profession and were largely confined to low-prestige practice settings and specialties, almost never in the courtroom. Now, close to half of new lawyers are female, and they're fairly evenly distributed across substantive areas. And women also express the same overall level of satisfaction with practice as men do. But significant inequalities persist. Women constitute over a third of the profession, but only 17% of law firm equity partners, 21% of general counsel of Fortune 500 corporations. Women are less likely to make partner, even controlling for other factors, including law school grades and time spent out of the workforce or on part-time schedules. Studies find that men are 2 to 5 times more likely to make partner than women. And even women who never take time out of the labor force and who work long hours have a lower chance of partnership. The situation is bleakest at the highest levels. Only 10% of chairs and managing partners are female at the largest 100 firms. Women are also underrepresented in other leadership positions, in members of management and compensation committees. Gender disparities are apparent in compensation, with minority women at the bottom of the financial pecking order. And these differences persist even after controlling for factors such as productivity and differences in equity, non-equity status. Women also experience greater dissatisfaction with key dimensions of practice, such as a level of responsibility, recognition for work, and chances for advancement. Gender stereotypes play a well-documented, often unconscious role in American culture, and legal workplaces are no exception. The stereotypes subject women, particularly women of color, to double standards and a double mind. Women also fail to receive the same presumption of competence enjoyed by white men. In national surveys, between a third and 3/4 of female lawyers believe they're held to higher standards than their male colleagues. Studies of performance evaluations find some support for those perceptions. Similar descriptions of performance result in lower ratings for women. Male achievements are more likely to be attributed to capabilities, and female achievements to external factors. In a survey of performance appraisals at a Wall Street law firm, women received more positive comments than the men, but were half as likely to be mentioned as potential partner material. Women are also rated lower than men on qualities associated with leadership, such as assertiveness, competitiveness, and business development. And when women do display assertiveness, it's often penalized. Female lawyers are still risking seeming too feminine or not feminine enough. They're too soft or too strident, either unable to make the tough decisions or too pushy and arrogant to command respect. Even the most accomplished lawyers can encounter such biases. Brooksley Bourne, now widely acclaimed for her efforts to regulate high-risk derivatives while chair of the Commodities Future Commission during the recent economic meltdown, was dismissed at the time as abrasive, strident, and a lightweight wacko. Women lawyers, unlike men, need to develop a style that's assertive without seeming abrasive. And I recall when this finding was discussed at a Women in Leadership conference sponsored by the ABA in Stanford years ago, many women railed against the unfairness of the double standards confronting male and female attorneys and the likability competence trade-off that the judge just mentioned that undermines women's success. But as others noted, that's the world women live in, and it's not only men who dislike overly assertive behavior in women. To deal with the dilemma, some experts suggest being relentlessly pleasant without backing down, and expressing concern as well as demonstrating competence. The discussion that we're having tonight is going to suggest other strategies, and I look forward to the opportunity to learn more with you about what can level the playing field for female lawyers. So thank you and enjoy the program.
Good evening. There is a secret language that all humans, in fact, all primates, all social animals use to communicate. And what we're communicating is relative position in the hierarchy. Who's dominant and who's submissive. It's a secret language that's going on all the time, and you're all experts at decoding it. You can understand all of the messages that signal dominance and submission. There's great agreement in what each one means. And I'm talking about really subtle messages, not just the overt acts of dominance or submission, but the angle of the head or the width of your stance or the pace of your speech or how close your elbows are together to your body. All of these are sending messages, and you're all reading them all the time. I'm going to show you a website. I'm going to show you a video that illustrates this a little bit. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the BioMotion Lab website. Does that look familiar? This is what we have. The walker. Seen this before? This is actually what does this look like to you? It's a person walking. It's actually just a collection of data from lots and lots of people walking with points on their different joints. And this is the aggregate data. All right. So I'm going to move the slider on some of these. I want you to tell me what impression do you get when I slide it this way? What happens? What did you see happen? A little faster? Anything else? Thinner? Do you get an impression? Is there any sense you have when I slide it in that direction? They look what? Hips. What are the adjectives? What sense do you have? Dancy or swagger? Great. All right. Good. Now watch. Let's see what happens when we move in the other direction. It's back to neutral. What's going on there? More assertive. That looks more assertive. More what? More confident. Calm. The slider was actually the nervous and relaxed slider. So this is the relaxed side, way over here, and then this is the nervous side. You read that? Notice how we just got narrower and a little brisker as opposed to sort of relaxed. All right, go in the middle. Let me give you another one. What are you seeing here? That looks female. The high heels, right? How did that change? How did the walk change? I'm going to go back to neutral. And what was changed? Knees got closer together. Anything else? What? She gained some weight. Watch the other direction. What's that guy doing? He's stomping, right? He's got a whole different look. Now, this is the male to female slider. This is the male side, of course, and the female side. Notice that these subtle changes create a huge effect. These are just dots that are simulating walking. A lot of what we're looking at that's changing the effect has to do with how much space they're taking up and the rhythm that they're moving in. We're going to play around with this a bit as I go further. If you're interested in the website, it's the Biomotion Lab. Status is a strategy that social animals use to avoid fights. Because fighting, the theory goes, is costly for the species. So if we can have a code that signals we can sort out and we don't have to actually fight and figure out who's dominant and who's submissive, it'll be a lot easier for the species. And high status is a message that says, don't fight me, I will beat you. And low status says, don't fight me, I'm not worth it. But they're both just strategies. Yeah? There are behaviors that humans do that signal these strategies. The behaviors can be named and described. I'm going to set up a framework for how to look at what are the things that signal authority, and then what are the things that signal approachability. But I'm going to show you the framework. We'll play around with it a little bit, and then I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Cara, who's an expert in actually walking you through how to make adjustments to your own behavior to be even more effective. So we're going to get a chance to look at it, to think about it, but also to try and apply it. How does that sound? It's good? All right. I'm going to take about another half hour and show you some of this stuff before I hand it to her. You're going to do things along the way. I encourage you to try it and see what it feels like, and we can talk about it, and then we can get something out of it, rather than judging it before you try it. I have to say that because I'm here at Stanford. And in my experience, people like to think it through before they do it. And it's not as valuable. In this context, we want to do it first. I get to teach, I'm a lecturer in the business school as well as the D school, but I'm also a lecturer in the theater department. And actually, this work does come originally from the theater. There was a great improvisational theater director named Keith Johnstone, and he wrote a book, Impro, in the 70s. And in it, there's a chapter on status. And a lot of the work that I'm going to share with you comes from what Johnstone observed all those decades ago. In recent years, there have been a lot of studies that seem to support a lot of his ideas. There's a whole field. It's called embodied psychology. In about 1988, Wexler did a study that sometimes is marked as one of the first studies of embodied psychology, where he had people look at cartoons, Far Side comics. You know the Far Side? And they would rate how funny the comics were. But they would do it while holding a pencil in their mouth. And half of the group would hold the pencil with their lips, and half would hold it with their teeth. And it turned out that the people who were holding it with their teeth rated the comics as funnier, because their face was in a smile while they were reading it. There have been other studies in more recent years. In 2003, there was a great study about people filled out surveys about different controversial topics on a clipboard. Some of them rated afterwards whether they thought it was an important topic or not very important topic. It turns out that the weight of the clipboard made a difference in terms of how important someone thought the topic was. The heavier the clipboard, the heavier the meaning and the importance. The studies go on and on. I'm sure you read a few years ago, they had people write opinions with good posture and with bad posture. And the people who wrote the opinion with good posture were more confident in their opinion. The way we hold our body has an effect on how we feel. That's part of what this work is. Not just how we're perceived, but how we ourselves feel. Now, I'm going to have you do a little experiment. You're going to talk to a couple of people around you. It doesn't matter how many, but I want to make sure that you get that you're not off by yourself. So we can be in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. If you have a birthday that falls on an even day of the month, an even day birthday, then I want you to maintain eye contact. When you're speaking to someone, I want you to look them in the eye. And it doesn't matter if they look away. You don't care if they look away. You just keep looking them in the eye. And when you move on to talk to someone else, go ahead and just switch people. It's okay if they're still looking at you or not looking at you. You get to decide when to look away and look at someone else. But if you had an odd-numbered birthday, I want you to avoid eye contact. I want you to avoid eye contact in a very specific way. You're not allowed to just ignore people. That's not okay. You're not allowed to look at your phone. What I want you to do is avoid eye contact, but peek back and see if they're looking at you. All right? So you want to look at people, but you can't stay the whole time, so you keep peeking. And if they are looking at you, you sort of have to blink and look away, because it's just a little too much. All right. So you can talk about whatever. You can talk about what you're going to do this weekend. It doesn't matter. But I want you to do your eye contact behavior, and we'll do that for about 60 seconds. Go ahead. Talk to the people near you. All right, good. Stop right there. Nice. All right. How's it going? All right, let's stop there. Were you able to do your direction, the direction that I gave you? Were you able to sort of keep it going, at least mostly? All right. How did those of you who did anyone talk to someone who was avoiding eye contact? Raise your hand if someone you were talking to was avoiding eye contact. What was that person like? They were real strange. What were they like? It made you uncomfortable. They seemed so uncomfortable that it made you uncomfortable. What else? Other adjectives or things to describe? Other things you noticed besides avoiding eye contact that they might have done?
Distant, lack of connection.
There's a lack of connection when they were doing the avoiding eye contact. What else? You owned them. So you were maintaining, yes. In terms of dominance and submission, is it dominant or submissive to avoid and peek back? It's submissive. People who were who talked to the more dominant, the maintaining eye contact, what were those people like? They felt in charge. You couldn't even look at them. Here's one of the things that we find when we do activities like this, when we practice it in the classroom and in workshops. When you take on one of these behaviors, we call it an anchor behavior. And then a bunch of other behaviors cluster around that. So if you're avoiding eye contact, you might have found that it was harder to speak in complete sentences. Yeah? If you were maintaining eye contact, you might have found that you were the one to speak first, that you were the one to initiate the conversation, that you were the one to drive and carry the conversation, that you controlled it in a sense. Yes? You were probably doing other physical things as well. I'm going to give you a couple of them and have you do the opposite. So if you were maintaining eye contact, that one is one of the high status behaviors. Status is the Johnstone word for it. If you were doing a high status behavior, I want you to do low status behavior this time. So this time, in the conversation, continue the same conversation you had, but I want you to fidget and touch your face. All right? So fidget and try and make touching your face as natural as possible. Don't just go like this. That's weird. But just naturally come up with reasons to touch your face and fidget around. And that's the even. So you're switching. If you were maintaining eye contact before, you're now fidgeting and touching your face. If you were avoiding eye contact before, I want you to practice this. Take up more space and practice stillness. You're not frozen, but you are still. You don't have to move fast. You move nice and smooth and slow, but you can practice stillness. All right, good. Do that for another 60 seconds. All right, good. How was that round? What did you notice doing it? What surprised you or interested you in the things that you did or you saw in your partner?
It's so much better to be in charge.
Doing the low status behavior is distracting. Is that? Speaking with someone who's doing all that low status stuff is distracting. What else did you notice? Yeah. 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 I don't know if this is true, but you might have started doing the behavior and felt, I feel like a 13-year-old girl. Is that right? Yeah. It's amazing to me when we do this. This is what actors have figured out. You do the behavior. If you've got a great director, they'll give you a note of a behavior to do, and you do it, and then you feel like the character. And then you go with it. Now, did you feel more comfortable with one than the other? Most people do. This is the theory about this. Most people have a habitual status that you feel more comfortable playing, whether it's high or low. That is not who you are. That is a strategy that you have developed over the years because it's effective for you to either play high status or to play low status. Again, it's just a way to avoid those constant conflicts. For some people, it is a very comfortable strategy to play low status, to be unassuming, to sort of slide in. I know, because this was my habitual preferred status. And I only really discovered it when I started practicing and learning about this in the theater maybe 20 years ago. This was my strategy. I would come into even giving a talk or a class, and I would play very low status. I'd say, well, let's see how this goes. And if I dropped my status, people would see me as very friendly, and they go, okay, I'll try. And I was asking people to do very dangerous, risky, scary things. I teach improvisational theater, so I was getting people to get up and make things up on the spot. And it helped for me to be a little like, oh, let's try it. Let's see what happens. I don't know. But as I got into bigger and bigger rooms and I started working with more and more important people, that strategy wasn't effective. And I had to change how I showed up. What I had to do was expand my natural range. At first, I tried to do it artificially. I tried to say, what you're about to learn might change your life. And it was not genuine, and it didn't feel right. So I had to learn how to do it in a way that was natural and felt comfortable to me. How to not give away my status when I needed to. And how to know that when push came to shove, I could still be playful and friendly and nice and connect with people. That I wasn't giving that up entirely. That was an adjustment for me. That was something that I needed to do. There are a lot of people that I work with who come in very high status all the time. And it's worked for them up to a point. And then they get to a place in their career where it no longer works. They're butting heads too much. They're running over people. They're finding that they're not useful. It's not a useful strategy in all situations. In fact, this is what Johnstone talks about. You probably, think back, you probably know a teacher from when you were in school who everybody, who had ruthless, dominant control in the classroom, but everybody was scared of. And everyone avoided outside of the classroom and talked about how awful it would be to be their kid. Yeah? Can you think of a teacher like that? And you probably had a teacher that had no control whatsoever in the classroom. Maybe they were liked, but it was total chaos and pandemonium. Even if everyone knew that their job depended on being able to keep control, they could only sit on their hands for so long before chaos erupted again. Can you think of a teacher like that? Had no control in the classroom. And you probably had a teacher that everybody liked, and they had total control in the classroom. Yeah? Johnstone says that if you think about those three characters, there is a status description. The ruthless control was a habitual high-status player. They did all of the high-status signals, always at all times. And the one who had no control constantly gave off low-status signals. And they could never get the authority back. Sometimes they would have to scream very loudly to get control in the classroom, but it wasn't authoritative. But the one that had control and everyone liked and everyone was connected to, That was a status master who could raise and lower their status at will when the situation demanded it. Does that make sense? When you think about the people from your life, does that describe them? When needed, they could play high status. When needed, they could play low status. That's what I'm talking about when I say expand your natural range. It's not about faking status. It's about taking what you really have and being able to show up with it. All right. I want to show you something. Let's play with this for a minute, and then I'm going to show you some slides that have lists of stuff. But I need a volunteer. I need someone who's willing to sit here in this chair and be a puppet for the audience and let us tell you what to do. You don't have to be any good at it. I just want you to sit here and allow us to try stuff, to experiment on you. Anyone? It's you. Great. Come on up. Thank you. Give her a hand, everyone. Great. And what's your name? Sherry. Great. Welcome, Sherry. Come on down. All right, Sherry. Thank you. So Sherry will have a seat right here. This is what I want to do first. I want you to, let's try and give her some suggestions of micro movements that she can do, things that she can do to change her physicality that will serve to lower her status or make her look more submissive. And we'll just experiment and play around. It helps to have a real human to do this. So, okay, slump. What happens if you slump your shoulders? Did that lower or raise her status? It raised it a little bit. You know why? She got relaxed. Okay, sit forward. Slump your shoulders forward. What did that do? A little bit more. Can you slump them more? She has really good posture. It's hard to break it. How about, what if you stick your chin out like this? Did that do anything? Oh, good. Hold your hand. Put your hands. Oh, yeah. Oh, look. That's good, right? Oh, lift them up higher. Lift them up a little higher. Oh, yeah. And so, oh, yeah. Good. Those, every time she relaxes, she looks a little bit higher status, right? But if she leans forward, it lowers it. Nice. Tilted head. Anything else?
She crosses her legs. It's a super feminine.
Yeah, let's see the leg cross. Okay, that's interesting. You want the knee cross? Yeah. This is taking up less space. In general, taking up less space lowers your status. This is really interesting because in my experience, when I was in middle school, I was taught very specifically to never cross my legs like this. This is absolutely my preferred way to cross my legs. Nope, not allowed. I was smacked down immediately. I had to only cross my legs like this. Let's try some other ones. No, don't do that. What else? Give her some other, let's try some other things. Let's experiment a little bit. Try something that you're not sure what it will do. Twirl your hair. Yeah. What is it? She looks too relaxed? She looks a little relaxed. What did you say? Not like at a bar. Not flirtatiously. Yeah. What else? Give her some other, yeah. Oh, yeah. You know what? If you can't quite stay still, if she turns her back to the audience and it doesn't look like she's hiding or cowering, it's very high status. But if you turn, let's see, you can't quite stay still, so turn forward. Yeah, and just sort of go back and forth a little bit. What else? Let's try another one. Oh, yeah, what happens if you put your one arm back there? What did that do? What did that do? It super raised her status, right? She's taking up more space. In fact, let's try some other ones that would raise her status from here. What would it be?
Take off her shoes.
Oh, yeah. Take off your shoes.
Let's put her hands behind her head.
Yeah, hands behind the head. We've got the Amy Cuddy power pose. Yeah. Yeah, feet out. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Really big, right? Even with the knees together, if the feet are out, the wider base, so much different than the toes touching, right?
Is taking off your shoes high status or low status?
What do you think? What does it signal? It signals comfort in a sense. There are, like if you went into a job interview and took your shoes off, that would be a way high status move. Now, it may not be a respectable move. It doesn't mean you'll get the job, but it's a very high status move. Well, it's context dependent, right? Yeah.
If you came in here,
Yeah.
it would be a low status.
Right. Like, yeah. Right. What do we think? What's happening as she takes off her jacket? Good. I'm comfortable here. High status sits in furniture wrong. Right? You don't have to use the furniture the way it's supposed to. High status sits on the whole couch. That's it. She's got it. Great. This is great. Exactly. Great. Let's give her a hand. Thank you, Sherry. Terrific. Thank you for the demo. The interesting thing about status is that once you tune into it, you see that it's going on all the time. Every single move that we make serves to raise or lower our status a little bit. Sometimes a lot, but usually you cannot just be neutral and just say the same. It's possible to play high status with your upper body and low status with your lower body. And it's a confusing message. Right? It's possible to... I had a student in one of my undergraduate classes. He had long hair. He would hold his hair and he would chew on it during class. This is a very low status looking move. But he would raise his hand and I would call on him and he would go, yeah. And he would take his sweet time and then he would launch into a long description of the meaning of improvisation in life. And he would hold court for the room. And he would play. There was a big contrast between what he was doing here and what he was doing with his voice. We can play contrast. So the status strategies that I said before about high status says, don't fight me, I will beat you. I also said it in a high status way. We can mix it up. I could say, don't fight me, I will beat you. Or, don't fight me, I'm not worth it. Right? That contrast is interesting choices, and actors like to use sort of the difference between what the line should be and the way you actually say it. We're constantly adjusting all the time. I'd love it if someone walked in late right about now in the talk, because walking into a room late, high or low status? It's super high status. Who walks in last into the courtroom? The judge. Everyone else has to wait for that person. So if someone walks in late to a classroom, they know it's so high status they have to adjust their physicality to compensate. Nobody walks in late and goes, I'm here. Get up. I'm sitting right there. Get up. Right? They don't do that. You slip in. You sort of come. I love that there's not a door banging here, because that's even worse. But then they sort of slide in and make, don't look at me. I'm not. And they sort of take up less space. Someone's walking along. This is one of my favorites. And they trip, lower their status. They go, who put that there? And we have to compensate all the time. If you say something in a meeting or in casual conversation and it's too high status, you say, this is the way it is. And you realize, gosh, I don't mean to be that high status. You instantly make an adjustment. You go, don't you think? We're constantly trying to balance and get the right status. We're experts at reading status. We are not experts at what messages we are sending. That's why this is worth playing with. That's why Cara is going to show you how to do it and how to get comfortable with sending different status messages. We're giving it to you with a couple of different language and vocabulary to help cover the picture more completely. But you're going to have to practice it in order to get a sense of what messages you are sending. It's good. It's good. It's good. Hi, welcome. Come on in. Let me show you my lists. And you have some stuff to take home as well that has even more comprehensive lists. But I want to show you some things about status. There are general behaviors that we do that serve to lower our status. And these are, in most cases, these will serve the case. To not take up space, to touch your face, be slightly out of breath. Not like panting out of breath, but just not quite enough oxygen in the room. To speak an incomplete to start a sentence and not quite fit, you know what I mean? Like back up and start over, you got it. To avoid eye contact but peek back, to put yourself down, or to fidget. Now, there are behaviors that raise your status, or that lower your status, but in a way that has high connection, where you are connected to other people. So if you lowered your status by delighting in attention, If someone gives you attention, you go, oh, and get excited and delighted by that. Or you seek approval, or you agree with everything. This is a way to be low status and connected. To lean in if someone touches you, to compliment other people. But there's also low status isolating. There's low status low connection, which is by completely avoiding eye contact at all because you don't dare to look. To guard yourself, to shrink, hide, withdraw, cower. Protect yourself. Yes? Does this make sense? Does this resonate with your experience? Okay. These are tools that we use in the theater and that we've expanded to using when we talk about leadership. I'll tell you what the connection is in a moment. The high-status general behaviors that I'm sharing today are taking up space, keeping your head still when you talk, which is part of the training that they give officers, police officers, military officers. It's training that they give anchor people who read the news. In order to be credible, you can't move your head all around while you're talking. It takes a lot of training to keep your head still when you talk. Use smooth movements rather than random jerky movements. Breathe fully, speak in complete sentences, and be in control. And the connected versions of high-status behaviors are maintaining eye contact, as in paying attention. Initiate physical and psychological contact. Protect, defend, encourage, support, and nurture. But there's a low connection version of high status, and that is to not bother looking at someone or to stare them down. We can use eye contact in very dominant ways. You can interrupt and change the subject, be aloof and unpredictable, dominate and belittle. Yes? Does this make sense? Yeah.
I'm curious why, under the general high status, you said keep your head still while talking.
Yeah.
My observation is that a lot of women
Yeah.
will not.
Yeah. So you're right. You're right. And I didn't write it up there, but I said it because I habitually say keep your head still when talking, because that's the note I'm trying to give a lot of actors when they're delivering their lines. But you're absolutely right. Keep your head still when talking and listening. Is higher status. It doesn't mean you can't nod. By all means, there are moments when absolutely, if you nod when you're listening, you'll show that you're connected. But if you listen with your head still, you will be exhibiting more dominant behavior. Nice. Thank you. Thank you for verbalizing what was going on in your mind. Great. All right. So I have a little grid because I teach. Oh, yeah. Question over here. Yes.
I've noticed that a lot of women talk with their hands.
Yeah.
Is that, I didn't necessarily see that on either of those.
I think that there's a lot of things that I do, right? There's a lot of things that we can say, they raise or lower your status depending on the context and how you do it. And I think gestures is one. And I think Cara can talk about gestures more practically and in what ways can they support your message. For example, I know that crossing your arms, raise or lower? Raise when I'm taking up space, when I'm showing off my big guns. If I cross my arms tighter, way lower. This is a guarded, protective, defensive move. It's not the act of crossing arms. It's not the act of the gesture. What kinds of gestures? This kind of gesture is not going to, like my Woody Allen gestures are going to lower my status. But there could be operatic, sweeping gestures that have a completely different effect. Yeah. Here's my grid. This comes from teaching in the business school. We need a 2x2 axis. We've got status on one side, high and low, and we've got connection on the other side, low and high. So in the low connection, low status, we consider that the avoidant and pathetic. The don't look at me, don't bother, I'm not even here. And we sort of hide with low status, low connection. But when we move to low status, high connection, that's more empathetic, that's more endearing. Sometimes that's a technique that people use to get other people to raise their status. Oh, I just made this, it's not very good. What are you talking about? It's so good. And it's a technique to get people to connect and raise your status. And then the high status, low connection, is the aloof, domineering. This is the jerk boss. This is the one who throws things at people and has to run the show and never yields. So, of course, in the final corner, we've got high status, high connection. And this is I think there's a lot of words that can go here. Mentor, advisor, I think an advocate can go here. I think there's a lot of important things in leadership that happen in the high status, high connection. In fact, that's what we teach. That's what we try to share. Leadership is not about only being in one quadrant at all times, but as best you can, getting into the high status, high connection quadrant. When you have to, you show that you are able to go into the high status, low connection. If you need to have a boundary conversation, if there is a crisis and you need to step up in that moment, you don't need to worry about connection. You need to be able to take on the high status and command, and then you have to be able to give it back up again the moment it's not needed. When you hold on to it beyond when it's needed, that's when there's trouble. And then sometimes you have to be able to drop status to have a connection. We see it all the time. I train people in the dorms here at Stanford to be the student staff, the resident assistants. And you cannot be high status and comfort someone really effectively. If it's only about being high status, you can't say, "What's wrong?" You have to say, "What's wrong?" You have to drop your status and be able to be next to them. So that's our leadership model. Any thoughts about that before I wrap up and hand it over to Cara? All right. I want to share one last thing that I find is fascinating in playing with this stuff around status and connection. And this is something that Johnstone describes in his book. In fact, if you're interested, I definitely recommend this book, Impro by Keith Johnstone. It's a great book about creativity and about education, but chapter 2 is about status. But Keith says, if you think back in your life, there are probably people that you have known for years and years and years, and you are just acquaintances. And there are probably people that you meet, and within 5 minutes you feel like you're fast friends. Do you have that? Is that true? If you think about the status relationship, if you do a status analysis of how you and these people have been connected, it is probably the case that the acquaintances have a static status relationship. One of you is high and the other is low, and it's been that way the whole time, and it's never changed. But the ones where you are fast friends, you have played status games with each other from the beginning. You have playfully raised and lowered each other's status. It's as if there is a signal in the human brain that when we mess around with status, it means we must be connected. So, next up, I want to give you an opportunity to meet Cara Alter. Cara is awesome. I've known her for many years. We were just reminiscing how she was actually at my wedding almost 20 years ago. One of my earliest teachers after I finished at Stanford and started doing this work out in the world. She is a celebrated author and teacher and expert in this field, and she's going to give you some things that you can actually do to get into that quadrant of the high status, high connection. Please give a hand to Cara. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. It's so funny that he said earlier that I was one of his earliest teachers, and that is not the way I saw it at all. I really saw him as my teacher, in that we were in the world of improv, and I was teaching movement, and he was teaching improv basics, and I certainly see him as the teacher. I rarely tell this story, but because of what Dan had to say, I'm going to start with it. And this is the moment when I decided I would shift from being in the theater world to being in the business world, teaching these skills. To give some background, I have my BA in speech communication, so it's not like I didn't understand this world or I wasn't already a part of it. But then I went into the theater, and I went back to school to get my MFA in theater. And while I was getting my MFA, I was studying status behaviors, and there was a moment where I was watching a student film. It was a murder mystery. And in this student film, so the whole time we really adore the hero of the film. And at one moment, about 45 minutes in, he watches a woman walk away. And he watches like this. We know at that moment he's the murderer. So for 45 minutes, we've been trusting this guy, we've been adoring him, and all of a sudden, in 2 seconds, we know he is the murderer. And that is because we all have a universal response to certain key behaviors. And when someone raises their chin to you, that is incredibly dominating. That is very aggressive. And so that signal overrode all of the other positive things we had to think about this young actor. So that was the reason that was the moment I thought, wow, what just happened? That was pretty fascinating. And so I became far more interested in studying these universal signals of what the terminology that Dan is using is status behaviors that came from Keith Johnstone. And that was my first introduction to it as well. But when I did move into the business world, one of the things that happened is talking about high status and low status didn't go over very well. Because no one wants to be low status. There was a real negativity around that concept of being low status. Just so you know, the way that it was framed to make it all right is that low status means you give status to other people, which is a very generous thing to do, rather than lowering your status and making yourself deferential. But because this didn't play very well in the work world, I came up with the terminology of balancing authority with approachability. Because these are two positive terms that tend to lean in those directions. And so that is primarily what we're going to be talking about here today, how to balance authority with approachability, and primarily to do it in a positive way. I'll give you some heads up on the negative ways we can do that, but primarily to do it positively so you can be authentic on both ends of the spectrum. There are some people, just in the way they carry themselves, you immediately have faith in their abilities. And some people do it with a big, bold, dynamic personality. And some people do it with a very calm, understated demeanor. But whatever the style, you just believe that they can get the job done, whatever the job may be. Now, the fallacy is that those kinds of assessments that we make about other people, that they're all very subjective, that they're based on nuanced or indefinable criteria. And as we're trying to explore tonight, that is absolutely not true. I've spent 20 years of my life researching how human beings assess other human beings. And the bottom line is there are metrics, there are ground rules. Certain behaviors lead to very predictable assumptions on the part of the listener. So if you can better understand what behaviors send what messages, then you can just be more in charge of the image that's coming across on the other side. Are you aware that certain facial expressions are hardwired into us? So not all facial expressions, but certain facial expressions are hardwired. And it is why we can, like fear, joy, anger, grief, and it's why we can read these facial expressions across cultures. Or why babies can read facial expressions at a really young age. But the same thing is true for your body language signals. A significant portion of your body language signals are what we call universal, and they are how human beings assess other human beings. And one quick example that we can apply today is the position of my chin. It sends you so much information about what's going on with me. Now, keeping your head level is a show of confidence across the globe. Literally, having a level head is a show of confidence across the globe. Now, whether you should show confidence or not, now that's a value system, and this can change in the culture. Sometimes being deferential is a better way of doing business. But if you wanted to show confidence, keeping your head level would be one of the key signals that would send that message. Now, if I raise my chin just a little bit, as we've already established, this is a very high status position. And if I continue to speak to you with my chin just a little bit high, even if I smile, you are likely to find me a little condescending or arrogant. Probably not going to like me very much. If I lower my chin just a bit, this is a very low status position. And if I continue to speak to you with my chin low, you are very likely to find me a little shy or deferential, and especially if I tilt my head. Now, whether or not I personally am aware of what my head is doing, because I could be oblivious to what I'm doing up here, it is still having an impact on your side. And even on your side, you are not consciously aware of what behavior is sending the message, because it really happens fast in there. So if I had started this conversation with my chin up like this, and I said, hello, everybody. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to speak to you. You would all begin to make an assessment of me really quickly, and your exact adjective would be up to you, but you would all be leaning in the same direction. But it is doubtful that any of you would have identified that it was my chin. You wouldn't leave afterwards and say, hey, Cara was great, but her chin was so high. So you just be stuck with your assessment of me. And so that is why it is my job as the speaker to be very aware of the signals that I'm sending out, because they are having an impact, whether I am aware of them or not. So the bottom line is to try to identify what does it take to come across as credible and confident. Because I am already starting this conversation with a belief that we share a value system, that being confident, credible, comfortable, trustworthy, that these are qualities, these are adjectives you would like people to use when describing you. And in our society, well, there are some specific behaviors that tend to send those messages very predictably. So let's identify what they are. I've broken the conversation up into a couple of parts. I'll first start with the basics, so things you absolutely should do to get those basic adjectives to come across. And then I'll address what I call the derailers, so what you shouldn't do to make sure that those adjectives come across. And then finally, I will address this perfect balance between being authoritative on the one side to being approachable on the other. But to give you a preview, let me just show you what it would be like to lean a little too heavily in one direction or the other. If you're using a lot of authoritative behaviors, and I just kicked into a few more of them right now, you are very likely to come across as capable, competent, and expert. But if you rely too heavily on these behaviors, you could also come across as unreceptive or inflexible, which isn't going to help you create a relationship with the people across from you. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, if you're using a lot of approachable behaviors, I just kicked into a few more of those right now, well, you're very likely to come across as interactive, personable, maybe even dynamic. But if you rely too heavily on these behaviors, you could also come across as a lightweight. Nice, but inconsequential, which isn't going to help you either. So you really need to have a balance between both sides. And if you personally know that you need to bolster up one side or the other, there are very explicit behaviors that will send those messages. So now on the basic side, the three pillars that hold up your appearance of credibility and confidence are strong posture, strong voice, and strong eye contact. And almost everybody has heard some version of that advice before, so it's not like it's uncommon knowledge. But most people severely underestimate just how powerful these are. So let me be explicit. Strong posture means that if you're standing up, your weight is balanced equally over both feet. And whether you're standing or seated, your spine and your shoulders form a T, like a metal T-bar. And this area right here has literal core strength. There is no wishy-washiness here. In other words, notice what happens to my appearance of executive presence as soon as I let a little flexibility happen in my spine. So this area has literal core strength. Then your head moves on your shoulders like a camera on a tripod, which means I can look over here, and I can look over here, and I can look over there. And what's not happening is this. And again, that's wishy-washy, or like a little kid in trouble. Also, your nose and eyes have to track together. So it means that if I'm looking at you, my nose points directly toward you. And if I look at you, my nose points directly toward you. Notice what happens when my eyes move a little more independently of my nose. I'm very likely to look a little uncomfortable. But I could also look sneaky, or mischievous, or judgmental, or skeptical. Have you heard the phrase, looking out the corner of your eye at someone? Now, what does that mean? Questioning or reticent. So if you want to come across as straightforward, you have to literally be straight on with the people you are speaking to. There is a concept in communication that's called marked and unmarked communication, and ultimately, and especially in the field of law, it is helpful to know how to unmark your communication so that the power of your words take precedent, that you aren't sending some sort of mixed message or some signal that's in the way of your message. And so let me address how that might work with the skills I was just talking about. I recently was working with a group of teenagers in a job placement program, and one of the young women said to me, Parents and teachers say that I show attitude. And I don't get what they mean by that, because I really don't feel like I show attitude. But she said it like this. Parents and teachers say that I show attitude. And you need to straighten that out. So regarding marked and unmarked communication, if I am talking to you this way, this is unmarked. There is nothing here except me just talking to you. And as soon as I do something like this, it marks the communication. So bottom line, what we're trying to address here is how to unmark so that all that's coming across is the power of your words, a sense of being confident and capable, and not some mixed signal. All right, if you got the impression in that conversation that you should be stuck still, that would be a problem. Because owning your territory, owning the space around you is also a key signal of status, of executive presence. And so while your core provides the solidity, your hands and your facial gestures create the interactivity or the fluidity in the conversation. And both are vital. They're like two sides of the same coin. They have to be going on at the same time. But what's interesting, and I'm glad the conversation came up about hand gestures, what's interesting about hand gestures is that they are hardwired, for one thing, hardwired. Even blind people gesture when they speak. This is not something that we learn visually. However, what's interesting about them is that they are an unconscious communication process. Which means that when you're not thinking about it, your hands very much engaged in the conversation. As soon as you become self-conscious, as soon as you begin to think about it, you have no idea what to do with these appendages at the ends of your arms. And so that's why most people, when self-conscious, will go into some sort of lockdown or masking mode. It is this very act of self-consciousness that gives away that you are intimidated or uncomfortable in the situation. So, bottom line here is that you don't need to learn how to hand gesture because you gesture hundreds upon hundreds of times throughout the day. What you need to learn is not to mask when you are uncomfortable. You need to learn how to own your territory even when intimidated, even when you're thinking on your feet, even when you feel like all eyes have turned to you. And the solution there, the easiest one I have identified is reach out. Literally, reach out. Hand people information. Own that space in front of you. Give them information. This gesture of reaching out is the most common gesture we use as human beings when we're speaking. Reach out. It's very safe, very generous. All right, your gestures happen typically in the gesture box. That's about from your sternum forward to your hip joints. The sweet spot, the bullseye, is your belly button. Hands talking in front of your belly button tends to be the most comfortable. A huge tell of nervousness is hands talking low in the box. So that's when someone's hands want to talk, but they're trapped down here. And what you can often see is you can watch someone's comfort level because the hands are usually in some sort of masked position at the top of the conversation, and then one natural gesture pops into the conversation, and then it's down again. And then another natural gesture pops into the conversation, and then it's down. Pretty soon the hands kind of break down the box, and the hands take on a life of their own, and that is the moment where the person looks perfectly comfortable. And I'm going to encourage you not to go through that dance. From the top of the conversation, if you want to exude a certain executive presence, the second your mouth begins moving, your body language needs to talk too. Because what intimidated looks like is your mouth is moving, but no other body language signal is online yet. And so you just want to avoid that uncomfortable situation. We also mask in our facial gestures. So the spectrum of masking goes from the one end, which is a smiley mask. And it's not even that it's a lie. I might, in fact, be a very friendly person. But it is the lack of fluidity in my face. It's the locked-on nature of this that is the problem. And sometimes people become so habitual about smiling under pressure that even when they're not under pressure, they just can't get that smile off their face. The opposite of this, poker face. It would take you a little bit longer to see this, but pretty soon you'd realize there's just no action happening here whatsoever. And as listeners, we don't just listen to the words of the speaker, we read the face of the speaker. This is protective because it leaves it up to you to fill in the context because I'm not committing to any of it. Either end is protective. Either end is a mask. And I am, just like I'm not suggesting you manufacture hand gestures, I am not suggesting you manufacture facial gestures. I'm suggesting that you should be very attentive to when you are wearing a mask. And just see if you can invite yourself to relax and create a little more fluidity in that area. Let's do an exercise for this. Everybody stand up. Stand with your weight balanced equally over both feet. Now, where your feet should be depends on your gender. This is not a societal issue. This is about balance point. For women, because our center of gravity tends to be in our hips, the most balanced place for your feet, the most natural place for your feet, would be directly underneath your hip joints. Now, for me, that is right here. For men, because their center of gravity tends to be in their shoulders, they would want their feet directly underneath their shoulder joints, which would be a little wider. Now, let's just talk about marked and unmarked communication. If I stood with my feet underneath my shoulder joints, this is marked. This is not natural. It look like I'm trying to tell you something with my body language. So this is neutral. This is unmarked. You wouldn't even notice where my feet are because this is just natural. But the opposite would be true for men. If you stand with your feet, yeah, come up here, Dan. Let's see this. Stand with your feet like just about this far apart. Oh yeah, that does not look... So marked in a different way, but this would not be natural for him to stand like that. Just stand with your feet underneath your shoulder joints. Yeah. So now that you wouldn't even notice his stance if he was standing like this. Great. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so that's where your feet should be. Have your hands by your sides for a second. Oh, this feels so vulnerable sometimes, but just try to have your hands by your sides. Now make sure your head can move like a camera on a tripod over here and over here. And there's no reverberation or pull in your upper body. Your head just moves freely. Like a camera on a tripod. Now, many people tell me that they feel stiff when they do that. Are you feeling a little stiff? So, let me show you what stiff looks like. So your shoulders and head moving together, that's what stiff looks like. But your head moving independently, that is what loose looks like. And if you were sitting on a park bench somewhere, just looking around, your head would be moving independently. There's just no way your whole shoulders would be looking around like this. So it's just the doing it on purpose that makes it feel a little unnatural. But I can say this, elongate your spine. Imagine that you have a little imaginary airspace between each vertebrae. Got that? So your spine is nice and strong. And now move your head from side to side. Now, a lot of people will tell me they no longer feel stiff. So when you have this strong spine, your head moves very freely on the top of your shoulders. Great. Now, pick up your hands like you're holding the biggest ball you could possibly hold, but your fingers are touching. Where your fingers are touching, put that in front of your belly button. And draw this circle in your mind. Really see that circle. And drop your hands. This is your personal space, right here. Now show me this way. This is your personal space. And if you want to exude a certain executive presence, the second your mouth begins moving, your body language needs to say, I'm comfortable here. This is my territory. Now, if you reach past this, if I do this, that's weird. So I'm not suggesting you go to somebody else's space. But you also want to avoid the T-Rex version of this. Here, you need to own that space. All right, have a seat. Keep in mind that this would be true standing or seated. Because I'm demonstrating these things standing up, there could be a tendency to think of these behaviors as public speaking skills, and I just want to make it really clear, these are not public speaking skills. These are every single day communication skills, and what you ultimately want to do is train yourself to have the habit of keeping your head level, of letting your head and shoulders move independently, of reaching out as soon as you start the conversation. Create that kind of habit. Dan mentioned how very difficult it is for someone to train themselves to keep their head still when they speak. And so note that keeping your head still is a very, very effective executive presence behavior. And I'm not suggesting your face should be in a poker face. That would lean too far in that direction, and you might come across as unlikable. So you can have facial fluidity and still keep your head still at the same time, and there you get that perfect balance. The question came up about too much hand gesturing. And I just want to say almost always when people get feedback that they talk too much with their hands, what is really happening is that they are talking too much with their head. So right this very second when I'm talking to you, you might give me feedback that I'm talking too much with my hands. But that's not what's happening. So right now my hands are moving and my head is level, and it wouldn't bother you at all that my hands are engaged in this conversation. So almost always that talk too much with your hands is talk too much with your body, the head. And so if you learn to have this core strength where your spine, your shoulders form a T, your head is level, by all means, then be as expressive as you want to be, but with a certain groundedness. Oh, let's talk about that balance out there in the real world. Do you know Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer? Anybody in the room not know who Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer, is? Okay, so I'll make this a quick story, but it applies. I promise it applies to what we're doing. Cesar Millan has a show on Animal Planet, The Dog Whisperer. He's amazingly gifted at dog psychology. And he takes animals that either have some crazy phobia or some socially unacceptable habit, or maybe they're overly aggressive, and in a very short period of time, he rehabilitates them so that they become socially acceptable. For many people who come to him, it is their last chance with the dog. In other words, they may have to put the dog to sleep if they cannot fix this particular problem. So in this one episode, the family invited him to come in because their dog, their boxer, was incredibly territorial and aggressive about the backyard. And anyone except a family member who went in the backyard would be attacked. So it was very, very aggressive. And this family was concerned that a child would lose a ball over the fence, or maybe a service worker would come to repair something and truly be in danger. So they really did feel like he was their last hope. So they tell this to Cesar. They're in the living room, and they're looking out through the sliding glass door at the boxer, who's about, 15 feet away from the sliding glass door. They're telling him all of this, and Cesar listens very, very comfortably. And then he goes over to the door, and the family says, well, you're not paying attention? The dog will kill you. So, but he's not deterred at all. So he goes to the door. Now, the family and the camera operator stay inside. But he opens the door, and he steps out into the yard. And the dog just looks at him. So he begins to move around the backyard. And the dog just looks at him, kind of follows along. And so he begins to touch stuff that belongs to the family, move things, reorder stuff. And the dog just watches. And then after about, it's hard to tell how long, maybe 10 minutes, but in the show, every now and then they put a timer at the bottom so you get a sense of just how long it was. Maybe 10 minutes goes by, and he goes over to the dog, and he takes a leash out of his pocket, and he puts it around the dog's neck, and he takes the dog through the gate to go for a walk. Now, if you've seen this show before, you know, I'm not kidding. This is exactly how it went down. Cesar Millan has amazing executive presence in dog world. He has this amazing ability to be both alpha dog and completely non-threatening at the same time. Now, we don't know what the dog is responding to because it could be something we can't sense, like maybe a smell or something. It's possible. But my guess is there's a lot of body language signals going on there that the dog is responding to. Now, if Cesar Millan had gone to the door with sort of a bravado that said, hey, I'm going to fix you, would the dog have attacked him? Very likely. Now, if he had gone to the door sort of timid, low status, thinking, I hope that dog doesn't get me, would the dog have attacked him? Yeah. So there is this middle ground where you can be both absolutely in charge and completely non-threatening at the same time. And that is the balance between authority and approachability. And it means that I have both going on at the same time. I have absolute core strength, but a lot of fluidity and a lot of interactivity as well. And I'm going to encourage you to try to get that perfect balance in your body language. And that would mean really be expressive with your hands, with your face, and let your core be strong. All right, so that's the first pillar, which is the strong posture. I put posture and gesture together, strong posture. The next pillar is strong voice. Now, there are a lot of aspects of your speaking voice, and I don't have time to go into a lot of them right now, but I do want to point out the difference between being technically understandable and really reaching people. And this is where most people have an opportunity for growth. And if you were in a workshop with me and I had a chance to give you direct feedback, I use a metric from 1 to 5, where I absolutely identify where are you on that scale from being just okay to truly being exceptional with your vocal skills. So let me give you an example of how that might play out with volume. One on the scale you wouldn't be able to hear me, so I'm actually not going to demonstrate that one, but 1 means can't hear me. 2 is a bit like this, which means you have to work pretty hard at hearing me. Now you can hear me, it's just that you are doing all of the work. So this is level 2, below average volume. Level 3 is about like this. Level 3 is fine, and by the way, most people speak at level 3 volume. It's fine. It's adequate. If you like being described as adequate, this is it. It's okay. It's fine. Level 4 is hopefully where I've been speaking all along. Now, at this volume, I'm coming all the way to you. I don't expect you to do the work in this communication. So level 4 means optimal. Optimal for the situation, of course. It's always a sliding scale and depends on the size of the room and the acoustics and the ambient sound. But 4 means perfect for that situation without crossing the line. Level 5 is that one step too far. Where if at level 4 I was really making a connection with you, at level 5 you begin to put up boundaries. So it is a really big drop from 4 getting you the perfect connection to 5 getting you the opposite of what you want. People put up barriers. And most people are so aware of that they gravitate to the safety of the average zone. That's the comfort zone. Most people would consider it an insult to be described as average, but that is where people hang out. Unless you get feedback on a regular basis that you are too much in some category in a workplace situation, doesn't count with your friends and family, but too much, you can just bump your skills up a notch and you will be more effective. The payoff is huge. The stronger your volume, the more confident, the more capable, the more comfortable you will come across. The other quality that I want to bring up, yes?
I have a question about bumping up for you. What is the technique you use to actually bump your volume up without sounding like you're shouting?
Oh, excellent question. Let me cover this issue, this one little aspect of resonance, and then I'll give you a couple of exercises so that you can physically feel it from the inside. Okay, that'd be great. So the other aspect I want to talk about, it's different from volume, but they're kind of in the same realm, is resonance. Now, resonance is your vocal quality. So it's the tone, the timbre, the texture of your voice. I'm going to bump up the level of resonance in my voice at the moment so you know what I'm talking about. Right now, when I'm speaking to you, there's a lot more rumble to my voice than there was a moment ago. If I had begun this conversation with this level of resonance in my voice, you probably would be thinking to yourself, why is she talking like that? That would be level 5. But you get the idea. Now, that's what I mean by resonance. It's that texture. It's that rumble. It's a vocal quality. Boy, that is a powerful skill. I can do so many things wrong, but if I have resonance in my voice, I am going to sound like a force to be reckoned with. So, for example, if I'm using this level of resonance in my voice, but I'm giving you some classic signals that I'm very uncomfortable up here because I'm crossing my legs and playing with my fingernails and darting my eyes. Even though my body language signals are screaming that I'm uncomfortable, my voice is compensating heavily in the other direction. It will be hard to get the impression I lacked a certain personal power. But this can work against you as well. I can give you a lot of physical signals that I'm in charge, balanced weight, fluid gestures, direct eye contact. But if I pull back on my speaking voice, and now I have this little teeny speaking voice, even though my body language signals are nice and strong, I'm not going to look like I have a lot of personal power. The quality of your voice lays such a strong platform for how seriously someone's going to take you. And the quick fix for bringing out more resonance is to speak up, so to speak at optimal volume. But the deep dive, the technical thing that is going on, is to get your diaphragm engaged. Right now, my diaphragm is working overtime. And right now, my diaphragm's not working at all. So that's technically what is happening there. Most people have a pretty weak diaphragm, but this muscle or this muscle set is a muscle like any other muscle, which means you can develop it, you can develop stamina and strength, and it is not accidental that we describe someone who has great influence as having a powerful voice. It takes power, physical power. You burn more calories when you speak with a strong voice. So let's speak from here. Let's find that muscle set. Let's use it. So your diaphragm's a muscle about the size of your fist. It's underneath your lungs. There are a lot of muscles working in concert, but I'm just going to simplify by saying diaphragm. I want you to feel this muscle contract by saying shh, twice as loud. Right, so I can see it happening, but did you feel that? Okay, that's your diaphragm engaged. That's good. So if you know anything about exercise physiology, you know that to develop any muscle, you have to put it under some strain. So we're going to intentionally put this muscle group under some strain. And we'll do that by saying the days of the week all in one breath. And I want you to elongate the vowels so that you cannot take a rest in between any sound. It will not sound normal, but it'll sound a little bit like this. Monday, Tuesday. See, I'm pulling the vowels out. So that's what I want you to do. Days of the week, one breath, nice and loud. Here we go. And Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You should have felt that at the end. Now, if you didn't feel that, you probably took a catch breath, so do avoid the catch breath. If you didn't take a catch breath, but you still didn't feel it, you weren't talking loud enough. I have a really strong diaphragm. I can feel this anytime I want to just by getting louder, so you can adjust that way. But you could also say the months of the year, or the entire alphabet, or count from 1 to 30, so you can make it longer too. You are trying to get this muscle to engage like that. Now, most people don't like that muscle set working so hard, and so that's when we often get this kind of pattern. The beginning of the sentence is nice and loud because there's plenty of air, but as soon as the diaphragm begins to squeeze, the person just relaxes the diaphragm, keeps talking anyway to the end of their sentence. Next sentence, plenty of air at the beginning of the sentence, but then the person relaxes the diaphragm and kind of trails off down here sometimes for a very long time down here before they reach the end of that sentence. So this trailing off or petering out. You need to speak to the ends of your sentences, and you could breathe more often, that's one technique, or just gain more stamina. Another very common behavior, especially for our younger demographic, is to go into vocal fry at the ends of the sentences. It's the same quality, or rather the same thing technically happening, except creating vibration in the back of the throat rather than from the diaphragm, so it sounds a little bit like this. The beginning of the sentence might have plenty of air, but then the person relaxes the diaphragm and allows themselves to talk in the back of the throat with a little vocal fry. So that's where the vibration is coming from here rather than from the vibrating chamber. So both of that is disconnected. Actually sounds disengaged because it is in fact disengaged. The diaphragm's no longer engaged in the conversation. So now let's work on volume, because that was the question. How do you increase volume? So your diaphragm is responsible for volume, but most people grip in their larynx when they increase their volume. But the larynx, the voice box here, plays nearly very, very little role in volume. All of the effort should really come from here. So I want you to try to work from here. We're going to count from 1 to 5, getting incrementally louder. So that when you say 1, it's as if you were speaking to someone 2 feet in front of you. And by the time you get to 5, you will be talking to someone 30 feet away. And I'm going to demonstrate it first so you get the idea. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here, I just got incrementally louder. Do that with me. Nice and easy on 1, really loud on 5. I should hear a huge difference. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. I definitely heard an increase in volume, but I also heard an increase in pitch. And when your pitch goes up with your volume, that's what yelling sounds like. So right this very second when I'm talking to you, it's not so much that my volume is hurting your ears, but my pitch would drive you crazy because I am yelling at you. So when you say 5, you can't say 5. You have to say 5. That is the same pitch as 1. So it's the same pitch, just happens to be louder. So I want you to keep this area through here completely relaxed. Let the effort for volume come from here. This is where the muscle work is. So let's try this one more time. Nice and easy on 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that was beautiful. Do you hear the resonance in the room? Just say 5 with me. Here we go. 5. That's some powerful voices in the room. So that's where your voice lives. 5. Hello, my name's Cara Hale, and I am the president of Speech Skills. Not, hi everybody, my name. So your voice comes from here. Work this so that you really know how to use the muscle set of speaking from your diaphragm. All right, so that is strong voice. The next pillar is strong eye contact. In human communication, eye contact is vital. In Western business, it may be the number one indicator of trustworthiness. And, well, have you heard the term, can you look me in the eye and say that phrase? So trustworthiness, very important. Now, let me give you my scale from 1 to 5 with eye contact. 1 on the scale, I'm not looking at anybody. I'm sure you've seen plenty of speakers where the speaker just simply does not look at the people he or she is talking to. So this is off the scale in the wrong direction. This would be a 1. Level 2 eye contact is a scanning sort of eye contact. And in some schools have thought this would even be considered good because my eyes are up instead of on the floor. But in my book, it's not good enough. I'm not really seeing you out there. My eyes just happen to be glancing upon yours. So this is level 2, below average eye contact. Level 3 eye contact is about a second or so per person. And so what I'm doing now is fine. There's nothing wrong with this level of eye contact. It's just that I'm missing so many opportunities to make a connection. But level 4 eye contact, hopefully I've been doing all along. I really see you out there. You know that I see you. We are having a conversation for a moment. So this level of eye contact is so much more connected, so much more organic, so much more like one-on-one communication. And I know you can't count in your head because your brain is busy, but the technique is to look at someone until you get to the comma or the pause in that phrase, and then you turn and look at someone else until you get to the comma or pause in that phrase, and then you look at someone else. So you're using your sentence structure as a way of moving from person to person, and that also keeps it very organic. Most people think that 3 to 5 seconds feels like an eternity from the inside, but in a workshop setting where I have person after person do a very trustworthy version of 3 to 5 seconds, the audience will say, wow, that's comfortable. They feel more relaxed. They feel more at ease when they receive 3 to 5 seconds of eye contact. So it feels uncomfortable from the inside, but is very generous and comfortable from the listener's point of view. So learn to hold eye contact for 3 to 5 seconds. Learn to work the room so you're not playing favorites. You will look more like a leader if you are talking to everyone rather than just the person you consider to be the decision maker in the room. It's not like you can't give the core message to the decision maker. I'm just suggesting that you spread it around. You will look more like you are in charge if you spread your eye contact around. We don't have time to do an exercise for eye contact because I really want to move into a couple of the derailers. The number one derailer is too many filler words. I'm not really going to go into that you can find lots of information about how to adjust those filler words. I will say it's very prevalent. Us, kind of, sort of, actually, basically, I mean, right, okay. And sometimes these work as bubble wrap to soften the message. I do encourage you to try to get these out of your style, and the best way to do that is to pause. Just leave that empty space there. But the one I want to address for a moment is the misplaced upward inflection. So a downward inflection is when your pitch cascades downward at the ends of your phrases and sentences. And by the way, this is what we would call the unmarked version of speaking in English, this downward cascade. The upward inflection, it can be as bad as this Valley Girl type thing, where I have a question mark at the end of my sentence, but it doesn't have to be this bad. If my voice just keeps going up into these upper tones, I might not sound as mature, as committed as I might want to come across. So the downward inflection is the function of a statement. The upward inflection is typically the function of a question, but that style has been co-opted over the last 30 years or so that upward inflection is more colloquial, and it has a little bit of a nonverbal message that says, are you hearing me? Is this coming across to you? Are you getting this? So that might be a positive impulse to want to be collaborative. But the message could also come across that you are questioning yourself, that you are looking for approval, that you're not quite sure in what you are saying. There is never a penalty for using a downward inflection, but there could be a penalty for using an upward inflection. People are willing to admit that they have a problem with filler words. Even though it's an ugly problem to admit, people are willing to admit it. No one wants to admit that they have an issue with upward inflections. But the metric on this, when I'm working in a workshop, throughout the United States, it's not just a California thing. If I'm working in a workshop with 8 people, 6 out of 8 have an issue with upward inflection. So that's the metric on this. If you just do the math in here, the likelihood that you have an issue in this area is extremely high. Now, they can be invisible to the listener. But when the listener notices, that's when it becomes a real problem. But even if they don't notice the upward inflection, they might notice that you're not as sure of yourself as you might want to come across. So let me give you an analogy about this with my daughter. My daughter is 19 years old. She's in college now, but when she was in high school, she and all of her friends spoke in near constant upward inflections. And so did her teachers, by the way. I would go to parent-teacher conferences, and they all spoke in upward inflections, too. So this is just the environment she lived in every single day. Because she was my daughter, I wanted her to know the real power of a downward inflection, and so I made sure she could do it on call. And she became almost like multilingual. She could, or code switching is what it's technically called. She could easily live in one style or the other and be completely authentic in both styles. So here's the thing. My daughter now has a tremendous secret advantage over her peer set. Because when she goes for a job interview and the teenage girl before her will be saying something like, I honestly believe that I could be a good fit for your organization, and if you just give me the chance, I know that I can get the job done. My daughter will be saying, I honestly believe that I can be a good fit for this organization, and if you just give me the chance, I know that I can get the job done. And the interviewer won't know why she sounds more intelligent, more committed, more mature than the person he just interviewed, but she will. And so I'm encouraging you to take advantage of this secret, just identifying it for yourself. And as I said, most people use the upward inflection unintentionally. So you might have to be a little more intentional about the downward inflection. Just so you know how to fix this problem, the typical downward inflection starts high, ends low. Sounds like this. The other day, I went to the Golden Gate Bridge. And while I was there, I watched the sailboats in the water. Now, the upward inflection does the exact opposite. The other day, I went to the Golden Gate Bridge, and while I was there, I watched the sailboats in the water. So if you want to correct the problem, you can't just correct the end of the sentence. You have to correct the beginning of the sentence. You have to start high and end low. So if you are trying to train yourself, that's just a good tip to have in mind. Start the sentence at maybe a slightly higher pitch than you want to so that you can cascade downward from there. I can usually tell by where someone begins the sentence whether it's going to be an upward inflection or a downward inflection in that sentence, just by the first pitch of the sentence. One more thing I want to talk about as a derailer is tail wagging. Now, on your list, I have it down as self-commenting, but I'm just going to blow it out of proportion here a little bit. Tail wagging is just an extension of self-commenting. Self-commenting is when you comment on or apologize for some perceived mistake that you make. Tail wagging, you don't even have to make a mistake, and you apologize for yourself. So I'll give you an example. I'm doing it now. That would be this swing of my upper body, popping into my hip, rolling my hands and feet, cocking my head, flash smile, little laugh. I'm doing a lot of tail wagging for you right now. Now, if you could read the subtext down here, the tail wagging subtext says something along the line of, take it easy on me, I'm kind of uncomfortable up here. Can you read that in my body language? Take it easy on me, I'm kind of uncomfortable. Now, that is a very feminine version of tail wagging, but there is a masculine version, and both men and women do both the female and male identified versions of tail wagging. But here's the masculine version of tail wagging. Looks like this. Again, if you can read the body language signals, they're saying, take it easy on me, I'm kind of uncomfortable. The problem with this behavior is that it works. They really do take it easy on you. Status behaviors, we respond to them. So the problem is, if I'm giving you these kinds of signals, are you going to beat me up? No, because it'd be like kicking a puppy. But you may very well write me off. And I bring this up because these behaviors are hardwired into us. Well, I know you are aware of certain chemicals in your system under stress. Adrenaline, of course, is the most famous, the fight or flight response. This behavior is driven by oxytocin. Oxytocin is your friendship or your relationship chemical. This behavior is called the tend and befriend response. So under pressure, instead of fighting for my life or running for my life, I have another tactic, and that is make friends. say with my body language, I'm no threat to you. And the female version tends to say, I'm no threat because I'm either so meek or so charming that you wouldn't want to hurt me. And the male version tends to say, I'm no threat to you because whatever. Not going to fight you for it, not even interested. So either side of that is a protective behavior. The solution for all that tail wagging is everything we've already talked about. Strong posture, strong voice, and strong eye contact. If you are doing those three pillars, you are going to look good, and it's how you counteract the tail wagging. All right, you have a handout in front of you, and in the handout I've covered a lot of the behaviors I've just talked about, but there's a list of behaviors for balancing authority and approachability. And the good news is I've already covered this information, but now let's put it into the context of, if you know that you need to bolster up your authoritative side, what can you do? Well, take up space. Maintain direct eye contact. Keep your head still. Keep your head level. Use strong volume and resonance and a downward inflection. All of those are very positive signals for authority. If you know that you'd like to show more approachability in your style, what can you do? Well, the bottom line is you could take up less space, but let me just say that would only be if you constantly give feedback that you just come on too strong. That would be the first thing to do if you get that kind of feedback. The better places to find approachability: fluid interactive gestures, fluid interactive facial gestures, lots of expression in your voice, and then the ability to elicit a response either by asking explicit questions or doing nonverbal signals like reaching in someone's direction and nodding at them yourself and being interactive with your gestures. Now, I am trying to do both of these lists at the same time. With the exception of taking up more space or less space, which I fluidly move between, I'm trying to do both of those lists at the same time. I'm hoping that you would find it difficult to decide if I am more authoritative or more approachable on this topic. But depending on the situation, I can lean one direction or the other, depending on what's needed in the communication. The problem exists when you're trying for one attribute, but you're using a negative behavior to get there. So, for example, having a poker face, being monotone, does increase your appearance of authority. But it completely undercuts your approachability, and those aren't very good speaking skills, so I wouldn't recommend them. But on the approachable side, bobbing your head a lot, smiling excessively, and using upward inflections, that does increase your approachability. It's just that it undercuts your credibility. So I don't encourage that either. But there are other ways to create approachability and authority. But everything that's on the list that I put out to you there, these are safe. Meaning if you build that muscle memory habit, you build that skill set, no pushback because of it. I do a lot of talks for affinity groups, women's affinity groups, but also a lot with attorneys. And I have to say, when we get a chance to have discussions, it comes up in every single conversation, the backlash that either you're coming across as too authoritative or too approachable, and what do you do about that? And I'm going to suggest that that's just a misdiagnosis, that, or you may be using aggressive signals or casual tail-wagging signals, and that's not the same thing as being authoritative and being approachable. So hang on for a second, let me give you an example of this. I was recently working with an attorney, and I told her that she would benefit by showing a little bit more authority in her style. Here's what she said to me. She said, I don't think that's true. People tell me all the time that I come across as too authoritative, so I don't think that's what I need to do. And I thought, okay, I can understand why she might have gotten that feedback, that she was coming across as too authoritative. But she wasn't coming across as too authoritative. She was coming across as too aggressive. Leaning in, looking out the corner of her eye, emphatic gestures, fake smile, that is aggression. Standing with your weight balanced over both feet, head level, direct eye contact, that is authority. So she really had been misdiagnosed. On the other end of the spectrum, I see a lot of people lean toward being casual or tail-waggy as if that's somehow approachable. It even happens for men. I'll give you an example of this. I was recently working with a high-level executive. He was trying to counteract an image of coming across as too stern or authoritative, so he decided to be more casual. So he started his town hall meeting like this. And instead of coming across as more approachable, he came across as aloof or distant. Because approachability doesn't lie in whether you stand like this or stand like this. It is actually my ability to see you, interact with you, be connected to you. That's where approachability lies. So both of those were tactics that weren't quite working. If you look on your list, you'll see that there are some very, very predictable behaviors that lead to a too authoritative image. Even if I'm talking to someone over the phone, if they say that they're coming across, that they often get feedback that they're coming across as too authoritative, aggressive, pushy, something along that line, I have a pretty good idea of what's going on because it's very predictable. Any one of these behaviors can lean you too far to the, of course you know that authoritative is the euphemism, right? That's not usually the words they use to describe you when you're too much. Some other version of that word. So when you get that feedback, emphatic gestures. If you have a tendency to have emphatic gestures when you speak, notice I haven't changed anything except my gestures, but you aren't likely to like me very much. You can do it with your head too. This is not head nodding. This is an emphatic gesture. It's just with my head. But it wouldn't take too long of me doing those behaviors that you wouldn't like me because I am literally pushing you away as opposed to this, which is more authoritative, more interactive with you. Having a sharp attack on your words. Sometimes when people are really passionate, they have a real sharp attack. Now, they don't mean to come across as off-putting, but that is what happens, and you might get feedback that you're coming across as too authoritative. And you just need to smooth that approach, that vocal approach out. And on the approachable side, you might do a lot of tail wagging or a combination of behaviors where you tilt, and they might tell you come across as too nice. I am going to invite you to look through the lists and maybe even see yourself on camera, because that's an excellent way to self-diagnose, and see if maybe some of these behaviors are creeping into your style. And then do everything you can to build a skill set of strong posture, strong voice, strong eye contact. Now, we're very close to the end of our session here, and I want to give you a chance to ask some questions. And you could also ask some questions of Dan if you like. So by all means, do that. But let's open it up. What's on your minds, given what we've just talked about? Yes?
So you mentioned on the last page, conceding too quickly when interrupted.
Yes.
I think interruptions are really a difficult thing to deal with because if someone has an idea, you don't want to stop them from sharing their idea, but at the same time, if you're not finished, you don't want to be interrupted and not be able to make your point. So what do you mean by too quickly?
Mm-hmm. So conceding too quickly when interrupted, if you have a habit of conceding too quickly when interrupted, you may come across as too nice. Again, that's the euphemism for the other things they mean by being too nice, which is too lightweight, too fluffy, something along that line. So certainly it's a dance that you want to, as Dan said, that friendship and connection is created by giving and taking of status. So by all means, sometimes you should concede, but if you have the habit of conceding early, that could come across as just being a little too lightweight. And so you have to ask, the way that interruptions work, first of all, we interrupt each other. That's what the flow of a conversation sounds like. And it is so weird if everybody just finishes their sentences. That, by the way, is what bad acting sounds like. Because that's not the way a conversation happens. The way a conversation happens is you get the gist, you get the sense that I'm almost at the end of what I have to say, and you come in and take the ball, like the baton in a race. So we're just constantly passing it around. That's what flow and energy sounds like. And so we do interrupt each other, and it's great. It creates collaboration. But some people will interrupt a little too early. And those people can come across as pushy. So in other words, they jump into the conversation without the proper feel for when should they be taking that baton. And some people concede as soon as someone interrupts them. But the other thing that happens when we're interrupted is many times we just keep talking and the other person quiets back down again. So you might learn that particular skill, which is when interrupted, say a few more words before you shut up. I mean, by that I really too mean a few more words before you decide to give in, so that you can get a sense of, is it a give and take between you, or are you always giving up? Because that would create that sense of too lightweight. Yes?
I've seen some men do this, but I've never seen women do it. When you see and they tend to be higher status men, I think the idea is to bring you toward them.
Yes. Right. So one of the things about the ground rules that I laid out, I want you to see them as rules like the rules of punctuation or grammar, which is that you would never feel inauthentic as a writer just because you're following the rules of punctuation or grammar. But if you're not following the rules of punctuation or grammar, people may not pay attention to you. There are some people who can break all the rules as writers, and that just makes them more interesting. So I give you permission to break the rules with any of these skills anytime you want to, but do it because you know the power of it and not because you're just blind to how that behavior might come across. Now, regarding the soft volume, there is this sense that if I speak softly, you will come to me. And that may very well happen. But the ground rule I'd like to lay out is if remember my scale from 1 to 5? If your volume is level 2, your eye contact better be level 4. Your posture better be level 4. Because if your eye contact is 2 and your posture is 2 and your expression is 2, people are not going to pay attention to you. So by all means, you can mix it up and get a nice texture in your conversation, but doesn't mean that you just take a low level of your skill. That's a deliberate, intentional act trying to draw people in. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I do. Thanks for letting me interrupt. I learned this teaching middle school, of all things, that volume wasn't necessarily equated with status. I could raise my volume, but if I didn't raise the resonance in my voice, I lost status. Quiet down, you guys! Like, it would be weird. And if I lowered my volume, but I also didn't increase my resonance, then this was not, I didn't have any control in the room. It was like my words weren't worth hearing. But if I lowered my volume, and I increase my resonance, then everyone gets quiet, and we can begin. Yeah.
Great. Good. Another question? Yes?
For those of us who appear before judges, you have two audiences. You have the judge, which you have to respect, have a respectful tone to, and then you have your opposing counsel, and you're making an argument. How do you, I think you have to balance who you're speaking. You're supposed to be speaking to the judge, but we all know that you're speaking to opposing counsel. Do you have any tips for that kind of thing?
I'm not sure that as not being an attorney, I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer that question, but my general take on it would be that if you are actually using really effective behaviors on both sides of that equation, the authoritative behaviors and the approachable behaviors, that you will be able to meet both of those needs at the same time. But if you are, in fact, being aggressive as opposed to authoritative, you might lose one of the audiences or the other. And so, but the thing about knowing the difference between aggression and authority is that people tend to respect authority and resist aggression. And so if you're not really clear about the difference between those two, then you may not get the respect you deserve. If you think you're being authoritative, but people resist you over and over again, I'm going to invite you to check yourself that you might, in fact, be aggressive rather than authoritative, because people respect authority. Yes?
Just wondered, you haven't mentioned anything about pace, so
Yeah.
sometimes I find myself talking too quickly under time pressure, for example. Is that?
Yes. Okay, great. Well, that is one of the elements we just didn't have a chance to talk about. Everything. The ground rule on this is the more slowly you speak, the more authoritative, the more comfortable, the more confident you come across. And if you speak quickly as a matter of habit because you just have a faster rev than everybody else, okay, that may serve you, but you might come across as less comfortable or more nervous because of it. And the idea that you're just going to speed up because you have a limited amount of time and you want to get everything in doesn't usually work to your advantage. In other words, you may lose respect because of it. You might look like you're frantic, which is not going to serve your cause. And I would like you to think about it like an orchestra. If time was running short for this particular concert, should they just play everything really fast to get all those songs in? Or should they do them all well and then maybe cut a song? That would be the more effective way. So, but of course, only you know what you have to get out. But I just want to say the ground rule is the more slowly you speak, the more authoritative you tend to come across. Just so you know, 2 minutes overtime. And not that I mind, but I know that you have lives out there that you need to get back to. And so if there are no pressing questions here left, note that Dan and I will be around for just a few minutes more for the reception, and you can ask us questions in that area. So thank you very much for investing your time. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, good.